Welcome everyone, and a special welcome to our three presenters. Ben Bond, many of you, well, most of you should know already through other Know Australia activities. He's our Performance, Health and Talent Manager. And many of you have also met Tim Retchford at national team camps at Falls Creek. And perhaps only some of you will know Dr. Larry Treese, who has a skiing background, and will give a bit more of an intro herself. But particularly for Larry and Tim, very keen to have them on board as part of our sport medicine support team, and to volunteer their time to assist us in our efforts to provide a more systematic approach to sports medicine support. I'm really excited and optimistic about what we're starting to put together in terms of the structure for support. And with that, I think I'll perhaps hand over to you, Bondi, to give a little bit more intro.
Yeah, thanks, Finn, and great to see some familiar names and faces, although everyone's off screen now, bar Lars, who's busy meal prepping. You'll have to tell us what you got going on there later, Lars. But yeah, equally, Finn, really excited to have Larry and Tim on board, volunteering their time and heading up the medical team for cross-country national team for foreseeable future for the time being, and really excited for everyone to be able to tap into Tim and Larry's expertise in their respective fields. And we just wanted to take the opportunity tonight to outline what that support would look like for everyone on the team, probably when they can tap into it, and to give a few tips around the Northern Hemisphere and how to manage things on the road. I'll just share my screen now and we can get into a little bit of a presentation. Finn, do you see that okay?
Yep, it's up there for me.
Perfect. Presume it's there for everyone. We just wanted to introduce ourselves. Obviously, Dr. Larry Treese, Dr. Tim Retchford, who's a physio, as you'll find out, who's done his PhD. We wanted to really outline what the medical team can provide for you as an athlete, and what benefit you can get from engaging with the team. Obviously, a brief outline of how to look after your health as a cross-country athlete, how to best prepare for the Northern Hemisphere, whether you're in the Northern Hemisphere already or whether you're in Australia going to depart shortly, a couple of tips around staying healthy on the road, and then how to manage any injuries or illnesses that do pop up. But I might hand over to maybe Tim first to give a bit of an introduction on himself, and then over to Larry.
Thanks, Bonnie. Physio is my key background, and I was a cross-country skier when I was a kid, particularly very keen, and raced and was in national teams and so forth quite a long time ago. But I live in Mount Beauty, and I'm still very passionate about skiing and ski racing, and I volunteer helping coach junior athletes in the region. So my sort of physio background is sort of partly academic and teaching, but I suppose the relevant part from you guys is that I've had a lot of experience with regards to looking after particularly endurance athletes, mostly in running, and that's sort of ongoing, but also in triathlon and mountain bike and so forth, and also background in coaching. So I've coached some of the better cyclists in Australia over the years. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with you guys, and some of you guys will be quite familiar, and others not so much. But I think that having Larissa's expertise as well is going to make it a really well-rounded team. So hopefully, you'll learn a little bit more, and you'll be able to engage in what we're offering.
Thanks, Tim. So lovely to meet everyone. I'm Larry. I'm a sports physician. I'm based in Canberra. I work up at AIS part-time, and spend the rest of my time doing a PhD at the moment, trying to investigate predicting recovery from low back pain in elite athletes. I too was a junior cross-country skier a very long time ago. I think, Tim, we won the Joey Hoppert in the same year, which would have been about 1990. I was talking to Mum today, she has COVID, and she was reminding me when I said I'd been on a teleconference with you, 1995 maybe, so that helps everyone age us. Now my skiing's done much more in the backcountry, but do still love to get out for a skate. My sports medicine background, most of my time's been spent in the sport of rowing, so another big endurance sport where people train a lot and have challenges with particular injuries and illness. Also was part of the Australian team as a doctor for Sochi in 2014. And as I said, I currently live in Canberra, but aspire to live in Northeast Vic along with Bondi and Tim.
Am I allowed to tell a story about that? I still feel embarrassed. There's a photo in the newspaper of, and you were second. I have to give a context to this, that I won the Joey Hoppert, but Larissa was overall second in it. And the local photographer said, you know, to spice things up a little bit for the photo, oh, do you mind just kissing Larissa? And I was like, you know, probably 15 years old. It was possibly one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. But anyway, I thought I'd moved on, but then I just got a flashback then. Thanks, sorry.
Sorry to bring that up, Tim. That's fine.
Classic. Thanks for sharing, Tim. Unlike Larry and Tim, I am not a cross-country skier from background. I grew up on the other side of the valley where not much talent came out of Bright in terms of endurance snow sport, but had a great upbringing there. Home mountain was Mount Hotham, and still really enjoy my skiing to date. And probably first came in contact with the cross-country team about 13 years ago via Tim and Finn when I was doing my undergraduate physio studies at Albury at Charles Sturt University, and Tim was helping out the team at that point in time as well from a physio point of view, and asked if I'd like to come and help out and do some screenings on these cross-country athletes and see if we could help them in any way, shape or form, and yeah, see if we could work out how they could perform a bit better as skiers. And over that period, I've had some ongoing involvement at different time points, and now find myself in a role full time with Snow Australia, trying to work across our disciplines and implement a few things around how we can continue to help our athletes. So really excited to have Tim and Larry on board to see what we can do in this space. So we'll move on. What can the medical team provide? Larry, do you want to maybe elaborate a bit on this slide?
Yeah, I'd love to. So Tim and I have already sort of started in this space during the winter. So recent camp up at AIS and from a medical perspective, and the camp at Falls from a physio perspective, trying to connect with you as athletes and offer the opportunity to have a health and musculoskeletal screen or touch base really. The idea being to try and find something small or identify things that we can assist you with that have interrupted your training in the past. So we'll be doing that going forward, hopefully in a regular basis, so you can plan to have a medical and a physio touch base each year. Obviously also offering assessment of problems face-to-face, if that's possible, when you're based in Australia, and also then remote injury and illness care coordination, I think is the best way of thinking about it for while you're on the road. So that might be telehealth to make an assessment of a problem while you're away, and connection with an appropriate practitioner wherever you are, be that overseas or helping you find good support here in Australia where you're based and training at the time. Ideally for those people moving between hemispheres, obviously we'll do as much as we can here in Australia to set you up with a plan, but then for people based overseas, we do also have some reach into different places where we can connect you or try and connect you with great people if there's things that need addressing when you're not around in Oz. Tim, do you have something do you want to add?
Yeah, look, I think the physio involvement sort of had various incarnations over the years, and it's sort of a bit dependent upon how many people are involved. If it's just me, I suppose that it's as the people in the camp probably see that probably just kind of making sure that people are travelling well at the time, and that we're addressing anything that is currently happening. But I would really love to be able to sort of get better insight and get a sense for how you're travelling over the whole year. So when we do catch up at these points along the way, we've got that background information. We can be so much more helpful. And the people that were on the camp that probably saw that I was sort of pestering you and going out training different groups and getting to know different people, and probably learn a lot from just skiing with you and looking technique wise and so forth, because that can really give me a very good understanding if you're coming in with something. I've probably got that bit more insight than I would have otherwise. So yeah, like during the winter, watching races and being involved. But as we'll talk about later, then getting, certainly if you've got niggles or things of concern, that getting the information to us at the right time so we can be helpful to you guys.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. And I think if there's, something the last few years have taught us is that, the power of being able to manage things remotely or how well they can be managed remotely at different times also is worth noting, that you don't always need, a doctor or a physio or someone in the performance space to be there right in front of you guys. And that's where we can see the real benefit of having Tim and Larry on board as well. We'll send out our details following this catch up as well, so everyone does have that. Welcome to take a photo of this now, but we will follow up in an email. But just how to access us, so obviously email and mobile phone were available through these methods. We might try initially that all initial concerns are very welcome to come through myself, being full-time with Snow Australia and working across the health department, and just being mindful that although Tim and Larry are, so enthusiastic in their relative roles, they do have full-time obligations elsewhere, and they are volunteering their time for the team. So I'm very happy to be that initial contact point, and then to follow up with Tim and Larry as appropriate. But certainly, given the right time and the place, that if you're close to Tim geographically and you have a previous relationship with him, and vice versa with Larry, if you're working across anything that's potentially very medical related or quite confidential, then you're obviously very welcome to go straight to the source. Availability. Larry, did you want to touch on this slide?
Yeah, I think we also gave this presentation this morning for your colleagues and teammates in North America. So we've sort of had a run through, and I'm thinking about how we asked this morning about whether people were happy to share whether injury or illness had really affected their performance or their capacity to train over the last year or so. But we've got a few more people on the line tonight and a few less cameras, so it might be a difficult question to ask. But this is sort of where Tim and I feel like we want to contribute, and we'll really repeat the message that we'd like to be involved, and we're here to support you, and we're happy to particularly hear early. And obviously this first period of time as we get to know you, that's the value of having a medical screening, and something we can do remote or in person, is that I get to understand a little bit about what's happened for you in the past. That allows me to then tailor some advice to you with regards to how you might minimise problems going forward. But really what we do know is that consistency of training is one of the keys to the prevention of illness and injury. So it allows you to tolerate a greater load without a lower risk of ongoing problems. Tim, something to add to that one?
No, I think that if some do that well, I'd probably just make an additional point, is that I suppose we're not out to be replacing your current kind of health professionals that you're familiar with and are close to you. So if you've got a great relationship with the doctor and physio, that's great, and we want that to continue. But I suppose our role is kind of overseeing the team and making sure that people are not slipping through the cracks. And as Larry will talk to later, is that consistency of being healthy and consistency of being uninjured is critical to being consistent with your training and getting good results. So I suppose that's where we sit. But having said that, if you're close to us or you want to contact us via email or telehealth service, then equally we're happy to be able to do that in the right circumstances.
Yeah, it's a great point, Tim, and I think you make that note around not necessarily needing to be, sick or injured at the time that people reach out as well. So, there's something that might be niggling, but you are still currently training, not waiting until the point where you're absolutely broken, either through injury or illness, and you've come to a complete stop. Let's try and be as proactive as we can. And to Larry's point, the big thing of tonight is around introduction and creating awareness and getting to know everyone and just putting a face to the name. And I think the more comfortable everyone is knowing Tim's face, Larry's face, their voice, and getting to know me a bit as well, then hopefully the earlier or more proactive you might be at reaching out when things do pop up. So we're not scary, and we want people to engage. So let's make it happen. I just put this one in briefly. I think this is it might be Sevi and Phil. Lars, correct me if it's you, but from Beijing, and just the harsh conditions that the guys were competing in was quite crazy. And I think you think of cross country skiing overall and the demands of the sport in some pretty harsh conditions and varied intensities of training. There's a lot of load going through your body, and there's some subtle imbalances that can sometimes throw things a bit out of kilter. And thinking more broadly to all the other things that you're all managing at different points in times of your life as well, with university studies, family and friends and work, and there's a lot going on and trying to perform at a high level as well. So I think that's just worthy to know. Larry, I might throw to you with this one.
Yeah, these were some of the challenges that I think come to mind for me, for people or athletes in your situation. And as Ben said, you're definitely almost certainly juggling more than one career or focus at any one time. So uni, exams, international travel, the challenge of traveling with a team for a long period of time. So being away from maybe your social network or your family supports. And these are the sorts of things that I think are really good to focus on in terms of helping to increase your availability and therefore your consistency of training and your ability. And they're all things that I'm really happy to have conversations with you about. One of the things I think is really important as a winter endurance athlete is to make sure your nutritional intake is adequate. And in particular that you've got sufficient levels of vitamin D and iron. And that's one thing that we will be doing as part of sort of me coming on board, is offering annual or twice annual blood screening for those athletes who are based a little bit at some stage in Australia. So we'll be checking your vitamin D off the back of the Northern Hemisphere winter, making sure you have sufficient iron stores, which is known as ferritin. For some athletes, if we identify any issues, we'll check again at the end of the Australian domestic season. If you're based overseas and you've got access to a doctor, we'd really encourage you to at least have a one-off check and make sure that your vitamin D and iron stores are sufficient, because we know they are really linked to health and performance. And obviously, Tim and I have worked with lots of different athletes, and one of the nice things about working with different sports is you pick up some great learning along the way. And so it's great to be able to see some of the things that we know have worked well in, say, rowing, very similar training volume, very different conditions, obviously, but lots of travel as well. So seeing if we can transfer some of that knowledge across, some of those resources across, and share them with you guys as a team. Which is probably a good reminder to have this slide in, Ben, thanks. So for those of you in Europe, depending on where you are, you may or may not know about Global Draw. All of our Aussies hopefully will. This is an online website where you can check any prescribed medicine and make sure that it's permitted under the WADA code, or if it's prohibited, make sure that you understand the process that you need to go through to be able to use it, which will be getting a therapeutic use exemption. Again, a very Australian-centric resource, but the Sport Integrity Australia app has a link that'll take you to Global Dro, and it also has a supplement checker. So if you've been prescribed a supplement or you're currently taking a supplement, if it's available in Australia, you will be able to find it on the Sport Integrity app if it's batch tested. And if it's not batch tested, you'll be able to run through a series of questions to help you stratify the risk to see whether there's a chance that you may be taking a supplement that is considered higher risk of inadvertent doping, so some form of contamination. So just a reminder there from a medical perspective that if you're popping anything in your mouth from an anti-doping perspective, you have ultimate responsibility for that. And there's a couple of resources here that can help you to help support you to make an informed decision about the doping risk of those substances. So we've already started sort of talking about how to best prepare for travel for those of you that are Oz-based. But obviously all of you will be travelling for competitions, be that just within Europe or intercontinentally. So I think it's really important that you have what you need to look after yourself while you're on the road, because obviously you won't be travelling with a doctor and infrequently with a physio, if at all, I think, Bondi, but you can comment on that. But I think it's good to have your own personal prevention and recovery pack, and we'll send this information around. It lists a few things that you might consider having in your first aid kit, which ideally you'd purchase in Australia, making sure you check those products on Global Dro to make sure they're permitted. And I think if we skip forward one, Ben, the list of medications is designed to help you reduce the risk of illness and also treat any minor illness that does come up with products that you can have confidence were manufactured and produced in Australia, so with a reduced risk of any kind of contamination with a prohibited substance. One of the things we talked a little bit about this morning is the way your immune system works and the importance of keeping your mucous membranes intact. So your mucous membranes are the lining of your mouth and nose, and it's where your body's army live, and they do best in a moist environment. So when those membranes dry out, you're more susceptible to viruses entering your system and causing respiratory illness. So doing things like using a non-medicated nose spray to keep your nasal passages moist, and sucking on Strepsils or using chewing gum to keep your mouth moist, particularly whilst travelling, are two great ways to reduce your risk of illness. The other thing that we used to talk quite a bit about in these sorts of sessions around education around illness is the way that different viruses and bacteria are passed. But I think we're all pretty familiar now with respiratory droplet spread after COVID and the benefits of wearing a mask, not just for COVID, but for other respiratory illnesses as well. And then there's also some information that we'll provide to you. So I don't know if you can hear the birds in the background. There's obviously they're having a little squabble. That the importance of good hygiene and cleaning and wearing a mask in the team environment if you are unwell, so that you're not sharing that amongst the team. So a bit of information to come your way just to try and optimise or minimise the illness that you get, and then optimise the management that you can do yourself while you're on the road, hopefully shortening the duration of the illness and not sharing it further amongst the team. I might let you talk to that one, Tim.
You talked out. Do we want to, just before we go into this one, we had some really good questions from this morning, or do we want to maybe give people the opportunity to ask a few questions before we move on? Because I'm not quite sure where we're up to in the slideshow, but there was some, just that last slide, I think to me was quite interesting with regards to, minimising risk of illness and so forth. I'm just wondering if anyone has got any questions, and if we don't, maybe we run through some of the things that were asked this morning.
Anyone? Any
Okay.
questions?
Did we get an update on what Lars is having for dinner?
Yeah, he's gone camera off, so maybe he's eating now. Might be ready.
Yes, I'm eating, and it's an early lunch, but I just finished the salad, I promise, but some tuna pasta. Yeah. One thing, you said something about chewing gum whilst traveling.
Yeah, so Lars, one of the best ways of keeping the mucosal membrane moist in your mouth is actually just suck something or chew something. So it could be a hard-boiled lolly or a strepsil is one of the things we've used quite a lot traveling long haul with the rowers, just to keep their mucous membranes moist. Chewing gum does the same thing. So in the fluid that's produced is IgA, which is one of the best defenses that your body has. So it clears up all of the pathogens as they come in. So one of the things we know is if you have hay fever, so for those of you that have been in Canberra on the camp, you'll know we had a huge amount of pollen and lots of people with hay fever. It seems to disrupt the mucous membranes that causes inflammation, and people are much more likely to get sick after they've had an exposure to an allergen like hay fever. So controlling allergens, keeping the mucous membranes moist, and then protecting the entrance to the mouth and nose with a mask are the best ways to prevent respiratory illness for people who are traveling. Is obviously a horrible tin can filled with illnesses and people, but it's also good to identify if you do have allergies. We'd like to try and stay on top of those so that you're reducing that insult to the mucous membrane, trying to keep it intact.
Tim, quickly, with those questions that were asked by the other group, I think perhaps if we progress through to the end, and
that's fine.
and then we'll cover if things aren't brought up, we can bring those up at that point.
Sounds good.
But certainly anyone, as we're going along, stick your hand up if you have a question.
Yeah, great. Look, I think this is probably one of our sort of key roles, and I think we've sort of really alluded to this already, is this idea that we just want to know of niggles or sniffles and things like that. And it could just be an email to us saying, look, I've got this, it's under control, but I'll just let you know. And so what we'll do is we'll send out an email on a monthly basis. And we just want you to be able to get back to us when, and if you think it's minor, well, just tell us it's minor. And but if we've got this pattern that we might be able to see over a longer period of time, it might just be able to be helpful with regards to being able to offer something more than just reactionary care. If we're thinking about the sport that we're involved in, the volume of training required is something that seems to be quite associated with the success in the sport. And certainly if there are periods of interruption, and even relatively short periods of interruption, then that can certainly have quite a significant influence on future success. So I suppose that this would be worthy of sort of considering, and I think that sort of part of your professionalism will be to be proactive and trying to minimise your chance of longer term injury and longer term illness as well. So yeah, the more we kind of get to know you, the better, and in some cases even getting an insight into training loads and getting permission to be able to speak to your coach can be of assistance as well. One thing that any time that we are sort of handling which is confidential information, I think that we've got to be we're certainly from our end, this will potentially be sort of go up onto the AMS, which is the Athlete Management System. Is that right, Larry? And that's a secure platform. So this information won't be just sort of swimming around in the ether. And certainly it's fine if you don't feel comfortable to contact one or either of us. But certainly, I think that we're a resource that would be sort of thinking that that is worthy of using. And I'd probably from my end, it's easy to think that as a physio, I'm probably not interested in if you've got COVID or if you've got an illness. But in fact, it actually does help with regards to if you have future injuries. Then if we look at periods of time where you're not training, then that can potentially increase the likelihood of other musculoskeletal issues along the way. So when you're getting back to us, just get back to all of the team.
Yeah, and I'd just reinforce what the point that Tim made earlier, which is that if we're not there to replace the team that know you well or that are located wherever you are, if you've got a doctor and a physio, but if you see them, and particularly if they organise investigations or there's something going on, if you have information, allows us to be able to understand who you are, so that if you do need us at some stage, you're away from usual supports, that we've got a bit of text. I mean, I'm up to speed quicker, or we're already up to speed on where you're up to. So it's totally fine to send us a little email saying, hey, I saw the physio on the doc today. They think this is going on. I feel really under control. I'm happy with my progress. There's no action required. That just allows us to bank that information and start to develop a really nice picture of how you've travelled across a year or across a number of seasons, so that if there are future challenges, we can look back and we've got all that information as well. So I might talk to this one too. Ben, and one of the conversations we had this morning is we're still recommending that people don't train through COVID. Obviously, if you're unwell enough that you've done a COVID test and demonstrated that you have COVID, we'd actually recommend at least 5 days away from training. That's going to allow you to recover quicker and also reduce some of the risks of secondary complications from the COVID. So in the past, we've said, you know, if you've got symptoms only above the neck, then you can train through a respiratory illness, and if they're below the neck, you should rest. Now we'd say if you have symptoms from COVID, we would really like you to step back from training, and it's probably worth reach out so that we can help plan your return based on what's coming up for you, if you don't have local support to help you do that on the ground. So that would definitely be one that I'm happy to help with if required. And obviously we've talked a little bit about the different routes of spreading of illness and what that means in shared accommodation. Hopefully you've packed that health prevention and early treatment pack, and you can start to look after yourself with a few of the things that are in there, and then gradually return to training over time. Have I missed anything on that one?
I don't think so, Larry. Questions? Finn, was there anything else from this morning that was brought up or discussed that we maybe didn't touch on just over that period?
There were just a couple of things. I'll just let me just check my my notes. But yeah, if anybody else has any other questions they'd like to prepare or think about, or something that we haven't covered, have a bit of a think. One question that came that you touched on briefly, Larry, was around this, you know, training with symptoms above or below the neck. If you want to perhaps expand on that just a little bit more.
Yeah, just reinforcing, Finn, that previously advice around training with a respiratory illness, so something we thought of as a cold in the pre-COVID times, we used to say if you have those symptoms, just sore throat or stuffy nose, that you could continue to train. Now we say with COVID, regardless of if it's only above the neck or if it's below, we don't recommend training for at least 5 days, and ideally until your symptoms have settled. We've also probably updated our advice a little bit more for general respiratory illness, which is you should be guided by measures that hopefully you're taking. So resting morning heart rate, general energy, response to training in terms of heart rate as well, and use them to make a sensible decision. So a non-COVID respiratory illness, if you don't have great energy, should you be training? If your resting heart rate's up in the morning, should you be training, or would you benefit more from rest? And same if your heart rate response to training is not normal, if it's really suppressed or it's really high. Again, that's your overall body system telling you you should be resting rather than training. If you've just got a sore throat, resting heart rate's pretty normal. Heart rate response to training is pretty normal, and it's not COVID, fine to continue to train. But again, I would always reinforce, reach out at that stage, reach out if you've got questions, either to myself or to the local person providing you with care, just so we can provide some guidance. What we don't want, and what I have seen in the past in sports where there's not a culture of accessing medical support, is people will take either not enough time off and then take a long time to get back up to full training because they've compromised their recovery, or they'll take a long time off and then struggle to get back into training because they've had too long off. So it is really that Goldilocks period of time, and that'll be individual based on the athlete, based on the symptoms that they have, the illness that's causing those symptoms, and obviously all the other things that are going on for them in terms of travel, competition and other demands. So there is no easy recipe to prescribe over Teams to 10 dots, but very happy to customise that to the situation and the athlete and the illness if people want to reach out. Did you want to add anything to that, Tim? Can you see that weaving into your stuff? I mean, you've already touched on the importance of understanding the consistency of training for athletes when seeing them.
Yeah, like, I mean, the training, you know, you're load managing with illness, and, you know, equally you'll be load managing with musculoskeletal disorders that you see. So that's kind of key. And I suppose that the more we know about the load that you're putting on yourself before, when you're healthy, the more we understand as to how we graduate you back to that normal load as well. So, you know, getting access to things like Training Peaks or whatever platform you use for your training, in some cases, can be super helpful to get an understanding of, you know, things like the training stress scores and so forth that you're looking to get back to, and be able to then sort of graduate those back up again.
Another question that was brought up from this morning was regarding if athletes have had blood tests recently. Is that useful to provide historical data, and I guess, or how far back is that useful?
Yeah, and Finn, I think super helpful to have a recent set of bloods for you as an athlete, but also for us as the supporting medical team, if you're happy to share them. In terms of how far back, if the last set were normal and you haven't ever had an abnormal, then just one set's fine. But if things are going well at the moment, but previously you've had an abnormal, it would be great to have an understanding of when that was and some of the circumstances that went around that. So having a copy of that result also adds a nice data point in terms of understanding you as an athlete and your journey and your health. So I think at this stage, probably any information that people are willing to share, if they're happy to share that at an appropriate time. So that's if you reach out for help maybe, or if you'd like, and you're based overseas, you'd like to do a medical screening, then I'm happy to organise to do that over video conference as well. That's a great way to get to know you and to be able to ask for things as they come up in that, or discuss things that may or may not be helpful, and we can formulate a plan together.
If no more questions from the group here, another one that was brought up this morning was on that, you know, keeping you up to date. How much communication do you want? I mean, you've indicated that you know, you have other work, but what is an appropriate amount of communication to provide?
I think, and Tim, I don't want to speak for both of us here, but so I'll speak from my perspective. I'm happy to receive information. I'm pretty quick reading through the emails and filing things. It's easy for me to upload things into that particular athlete's medical file, e-health record in the athlete management system. If it gets too much, I'm also really happy to say, hey, thanks very much, but you can calm the farm on the comms. So probably starting with more, and working from that point is better than not getting anything and thinking that everyone's fine and there's no problems and there's nothing that needs sort of to be contributed to, which would be the sort of the no emails.
Yeah, I agree. And look, traditionally, and this would be not just for you guys as cross-country skiers, but most of the endurance athletes that I've dealt with, is that we don't hear much, and then when things turn terrible, get lots of communication. So I suppose what we're really stressing here is that keep us up to date on a more regular basis, and then the communication will probably then sort of naturally be sort of mediated. You're less likely to have those sort of crisis times.
Perfect.
Does anyone have? Oh, someone had a hand up just briefly.
Yeah,
maybe.
Adam, I think it was. Yeah, Adam Barnett. Adam.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering. I don't actually know if I've ever been taught how properly it is that we should take morning heart rate, like the procedure of doing that. I don't know. Do you have any procedure on that?
Tim, are you using it? Do you want to talk to it or
Yeah, I honestly, the main thing is consistency, because you're not comparing it to anyone else. So if you want to, have your, you wake up in the morning, one method is, and I'm not a fan of using smart watches without using a band. I think that if you actually want to get a proper reading, you need to put your band on. One method that some people use, that coach will just, they'll get up in the morning, they'll put the band on, they'll just chill out for a minute, and then they'll just take that recording that they get after a minute or two. And again, it might be the lowest you'll ever see, but it doesn't really matter as long as you've got a consistency with regards to the technology you use, and also consistency in terms of how you do it, and thinking about, okay, if I'm overseas, could I use that same method? Heart rate variability and standing heart rate versus just lying down heart rate's used as well. But what I find is that the more complicated the regime, the less likely people are going to do it for years and years. So just having something simple, do it every day, don't analyze it until you've got probably a couple of months of data, and then you'll have a really clear idea as to when there's fluctuations, they actually mean something. Whereas when you've only got about 7 data points, it doesn't make much difference. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it, because you kind of need to ride a higher resting heart rate if you want to get better sometimes. But I suppose it's that the art of knowing when too much is too much, and the other sort of thing, a paradoxical sort of decrease in heart rate often when people get sick. So it's going back to what Larry said. I think that, out of all this data, the best data is how you feel. And if you've got energy and you're motivated and you're not grumpy, you're trainable. And if you're any of those other things, you're generally, that would be better, in my opinion, as a coach. They're the most sensitive kind of ways of managing yourself.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I definitely concur with everything that Tim said. I used 2 different methods at different times while I was training years ago, and the most useful thing is if you've got a good background or history, that you start to know that if your heart rate is up 3 or 4 beats and there's other information as well, then perhaps it's time to take a rest. So it's one of the additional pieces of information that you're adding into the mix.
And I think that's, we're looking for lots of, or some data on you to help you better, but also helping by you having data on yourself and understanding yourself, either through working with a clinician or just gathering that data over time. That also helps you to make good decisions about your health. So it helps us help you make good decisions, but it also helps you to make good decisions about your health as well.
We can in together with the information that's going to be distributed after the meeting, I can add in a couple of methods of measuring morning heart rate as well.
That'd be great, Finn.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think just to elaborate on that sort of further point, I just think it's really important if you don't have objective data on yourself, it's very hard to see how you're heading in a direction that's successful. I think you need to be able to be recording training loads, heart rate responses and so forth, and you need to use the same methods over a long period of time to be able to really understand what you're doing and whether or not your training is actually having a meaningful effect on your system.
I have a quick question. Sorry, I'm just on my way to work. If we were to communicate, or when we do communicate stuff about whether we're sick or whatever, is that through the AMS or do you want us to email? Or how should we go about communicating best?
Great question, Phoebe. Eventually it would be amazing if we were able to message you and get you to fill in information through the AMS. But at the moment, if you're happy to share details via email, obviously it's not super secure. There is still the risk that your information can be breached as part of that. Email is probably the most efficient and effective way of doing so. Any information you share with me, so say you were to have a scan or there was a doctor letter, that all gets stored in the AMS. So we're not really emails for communication, but we are trying to maintain that e-health record so that it's all in one place, and regardless of where you're seen in the Australian sporting system, that information's all available. But communication is probably easiest via email.
One small thing to add around the AMS is that coaches don't have access to that medical information, so it's only the sports med team that has access to the information that is collected in there.
And that would also be, so from an understanding of confidentiality perspective, I will always ask you who you're happy to share the information that we discuss with. Obviously always encouraging for that to go to Tim and to be shared with the coaching team as appropriate. But that's always something that we'll check. So there's you'll have the opportunity to guide the clinician involved in that process.
Cool, thank you.
Looked a little chilly where Phoebe was.
Mm.
Yeah, it is a bit cold. I'm in Oslo.
Okay. What sort of work are you doing?
Good question. I work
Not confidential,
in
is it?
HR consulting company.
Not good.
So, yeah. Sometimes don't really know what I do.
Good, enjoy.
All right, well, we're coming up towards 8 o'clock. So if anyone else has any questions, this is your opportunity to put it out there. Otherwise, of course, you can also reach out to people with questions remotely after the meeting. Any closing remarks from our sports med team?
Just to say that, well, thanks a lot for coming along. And for the people who arrived a bit later and missed the starting point, that Ben or Finn will be distributing the slides. So the information that was discussed earlier on will be available, and that'll include our contact emails and phone numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And we are recording, which we're just about to wrap up as well. So hopefully we'll be able to generate the video for people to have a look at who couldn't come. But Finn, from my end, I think, over the past few years, we've had different instances or situations pop up with athletes, either domestically or abroad, where we've needed to sort of triage them and get other people, you know, involved, be that specialists or doctors or physios from afar. And just hearing Tim and Larry speak around, you know, having all that knowledge around injury and illness, but having all that that sport specific knowledge around training and how the sport is actually done, the demands specific to the sport is just going to be such the icing on the cake. So I'm really excited for this group and the opportunity that they have to access the both of you, and yeah, would encourage everyone to do so.
Thanks, Ben. Just look forward to hopefully meeting a few people in person, going for a ski slowly.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right, we'll stop the recording, which we can.